viewership is getting divided. So a lot of effort to figure out how many actually attended, because we are live on Facebook as well as
Facebook. We're live on 5 platforms. So, it's kind of really getting split. It's on my page, it's on Alok's page, it's on Guts Glory Story page, so.
Yeah, the more diversity in the channels, exactly, the more the numbers are hard to tell. So very much so.
That is right. That's right. That's right.
People are streaming in.
Yes, we have a lot of attendees. Hey, Devyesh, thank you for joining. My dad is there. Jitendra Sinha. Thank you for joining, Dad.
Welcome, sir. Welcome to God's Glory Story. Is that the first time, Alok?
He watches, but not from his laptop. Yes, this is the first time from his own laptop. That means he's sitting and watching.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
I have Prakash Kundalia. Hi, Prakash. Prakash is the chairman of Kundalia Industries. So, hi, Prakash. I have Pranav, Pridarshan. Hi again. CV. Oh, CV has joined us from Malaysia or Singapore. CV, hi. Samir Sate is there. Samir.
Lovely, lovely. Babita is here. Hi, Babita.
Srini is here. Swaroop Satya Prakash. Thank you. He's joined us from London. Tiliga, hi. Oh, we've got some heavy viewers today. Floyd De Silva, hi from Goa. Hi, Floyd. Very rapidly we're getting the folks.
Yeah. And Sai is logged in from Chicago, right?
That is correct.
Sai from Chicago. Charvi, thank you for joining. Anurag from Delhi, he's joined us. Hi. Hi, Anurag. Babita is there. Hi.
My friend and neighbor Rishikesh Joshi has joined us. Hi, Rishikesh.
Brooks. Hi, Brooks.
So we would go live in about 2 minutes, about 6:03, I think at around 6:05, which is our customary time to kickstart is when we will go live.
So just for the viewers, Sai actually tested us for antifragility today in the morning.
Yeah, we usually have our guests coming at 5 to 6, and Sai suddenly said, let me turn a bang at 6 and let me see if I put them in this disorderly situation, these two are going to display any antifragility, right?
And Sangram and Alok, we haven't even started yet. So just wait until we get started.
You're right. You're right. Yeah, we just starting now. Another 2 minutes, 1 minute, maybe a couple of minutes we'll be on.
Yeah.
Arvind is there. Hi, Arvind. Arnav. Oh, a lot of people there.
Arnab is here. Hi, Arnab. Arvind is also here. Yeah. Arnab and Arvind have joined us from WeWork. We have something coming up our sleeves in collaboration with WeWork. We shall wait and watch what it is.
Yeah. Something very interesting, Guts, Glory and Story and WeWorks are doing together. And we have both Arnab and Arvind on the session today. Sujit, hi. I have Wilma Rodrigues, and I know Wilma Rodrigues from long ago. I'm wondering whether she's my colleague from Tata Motors days.
Oh, lovely.
Which is like, I'm talking about 25-year-old. Wilma, if you are, welcome.
Yes, I think it's 6:05, and I think, Alok, we should go live, right?
Go ahead.
So good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to session 10 of Guts, Glory and Story with Alok and Sangram. And today we have a very interesting topic, very close to our hearts. Last Saturday, I think, was very different. We went down the memory lane and we were in the wonderful, innocent world of Amar Chitrakatha and Tinkle. And today it's very different. We have a topic called antifragility. Apparently, the quality that makes things grow stronger under disorder. And what a topic for the times, because we only have disorder all around us. And hopefully at the end of this session, Sai will take us on a journey which will make all of us a little more anti-fragile. this entire crisis is over. But before that, for anyone, I doubt that there might be few who might not know us, but for those who don't, I am Sangram Surve. I'm an ad man, a filmmaker, and a content evangelist. And with me is my, as he calls me sometimes, I'm calling him now, as my illustrious co-host, Alok Sinha, who is a serial entrepreneur, author, investor. And his book, Achieving Successful Business Outcomes, has been released by Taylor and Francis recently and is an appropriate strategic guide for times like these. I'll just put down the lay of the day or the lay of the evening for that matter, if you will. And Alok and me will be throwing a lot of questions to decode antifragility to Sai, and Sai will be answering that. Post that, I'm sure all of you would be wanting to know, how do we become more antifragile? In short, all of you would be having your own questions. So we will throw the platform open and you can ask your questions to him. We'll have some poll questions to just test out how much you understand antifragility. And to actually welcome the man of the evening on our platform, I'm going to call on his brother from another world, as Alok and Sai both call it. So Alok, it's over to you to welcome our guest very warmly into this evening. Over to you.
Thank you, Sangram. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And I am delighted to present to you Sinan Si Alhir. As Sangram said, my brother from previous life, but also an author, a thought leader, an agility and antifragility practitioner and a coach. He calls himself an alchemist and a catalyst. And with over 4 decades of working with startups and Fortune 500 companies, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our power guest for today, speaking on agility, resilience, and antifragility, Si Alhir. Si, welcome to Guts, Glory, and Story.
Thank you both ever so much. Most definitively to my brother Alok from a previous life, and I hope future lives, and likewise Sangram by all means. So thank you, and thank you for all the participants with us today.
Thank you. So Si, I'll dig into my first question, and in my introduction video for this session, I had asked people whether they believed in miracles. And the answer which I gave in my video was, yes, I do. Primarily because I am aware of the evening when you had collapsed. And medical investigations later had revealed that you had likely gone through a complete death experience. Very few people. Usually we read about such peoples in magazines, but never do you have a friend who has gone through such an experience. How has this experience, amongst others, made you grow so comfortable with a hugely fearful topic that is death? And how does all of this relate to agility, resilience, and antifragility? Sai.
Thank you so much, Alok. And it is a very it's a very refreshing experience. And the reason I say that, it provides clarity. There is no guarantee of anything. Absolutely nothing in the world is guaranteed us. You could walk out today, you could experience something that you did not anticipate. So for me, in having that experience 3 full times, very vividly, it really has brought me a lot of clarity, Alok and Sangram. And that degree of clarity manifests in both my personal life and my professional life. And what I mean very deliberately in clarity, I've come to recognize that if you look at the human experience as that we go through, there's really very few fundamental elements. One is most people don't deal with reality. They think today's good, today's bad. They don't deal with the reality that today we have no idea what will happen. And this is where randomness and uncertainty begins to enter the picture. Additionally, the other piece of clarity that comes into the picture, Alok, is human nature. On a good day, whatever good means, I may have a different experience with Sangram. On another day, whatever Sangram's perspective might be, it might be a whole different experience. Human nature is extremely unpredictable. It's not good or bad, it just is, just like reality. And then the other piece that really became clear as I've had these multiple experiences and working with organizations, working with people, is everything boils down to identity. The most personal question you can ask someone is, who are you? It's a highly personal question. And at that point, the answer that you get is extremely revealing about how they see themselves, how they engage the world. If you look at those aspects, bring them together, it's a heightened sense of awareness that allows us to really have an impact in the world, Alok. By having the death experiences, it's brought me a degree of clarity that I can work with individuals and organizations and also with myself, because anti-fragility, resilience, agility, these are not absolutes. There are things that they don't make you immortal, if you will. There are things that will destroy us. But fundamentally, my personal experience and journey has brought me clarity, Alok. That is the general answer, my good friend, to those elements.
But give me a little bit more. What happened, if I can
Yeah,
ask you that? And I know that wasn't part of the question, but if you feel okay,
definitely.
tell us what happened.
Most definitely. So so the experience itself, if you will, I had gone and I wasn't feeling too well, and then ultimately, as I got up in the middle of the night, I found myself in a worldly place. I found myself with two creatures, as I've mentioned on other occasions, that almost seemed surreal, Alok. They were not, if you will, of the same color that we see here in this life. And these two creatures didn't look friendly either. And you and I know, right? And when you, just like when you wake up from a dream, you're a little bit disoriented. So I didn't know what to think. Am I awake? Am I asleep? Am I here? Am I elsewhere? And as I kind of began to really just look at the both creatures that were on my shoulders or that were carrying me very, very specifically, they didn't look friendly. And then you have the sensation, I don't know where I am. The one thing I will say is, if you think about color, and I'm colorblind, Alok and Sangram, I see variations, but I don't see color in the same way. I actually saw color, and it was sparkly in many ways. And as I began to feel uneasy, I began to shrug a little bit, and they held on more tightly. As I looked in the distance, I saw a bit of fog, which in retrospect, it was likely my body, if you will. So very much out of body, and recognizing that. And then I became uneasy and I began to struggle with them. As I struggled, they held more tightly. As I continued struggle, they ultimately let go. When they let go, Alok, that's when I found myself returned in the reality that we call today. And when I came to, I didn't recollect any of this. It actually came over time, Alok. And it's began, and what happened to me is my senses became much more acute over time. My sense of smell, my ability, if you will, to really spend time with you, and then after spending time with you, begin to recognize when you are in a particular place, or when you have been there before I've arrived and you've already left. Sense of touch, sense of smell, sense of awareness. The other big piece, and I look at it very honestly as a gift, the mystery of life and everything is alive is a radically different experience. Now you may say, and this was part of your question, Alok, how does all this relate to agility, resilience, and anti-fragility? This is the experience that organizations and individuals have when they achieve greater anti-fragility and greater agility relative to different sources and stresses that we encounter. That's a little bit more detail, my friend.
Okay. So I think I'm going to dive down into the question that I think we've kind of teased the audiences with over all our teasers. And I think it fundamentally boils down to what is anti-fragility, right? And I think people need to know the difference between what is fragility, what is anti-fragility, what is robustness.
Excellent. Thank you, Sangram. And as I dive into that question, I want to be very, very, very clear, if you will. Some of the things I'm going to say are going to be challenging. So we're going to talk about teams, and very openly, the most fragile construct in organizations are teams. It's the most fragile. So I'm going to challenge our senses. At the same time, if we talk about now reality, and this is where the bridge begins to build to these concepts, the reality that we experience, we are naturally fearful of reality because we don't understand it. So our immediate response is to try to control it. Well, as we try to control reality and the things that happen around us, Control is very much an illusion, and we start to give it different labels. And the labels now that we begin to give it are words like agility, resilience, anti-fragility, etc. These are all tools that we really need to think about. I want to make a distinction with these words before I give clarity as to the terms themselves or deeper clarity. I want to make a distinction between randomness, uncertainty, and risk. So let's kind of start there. If you think about randomness, randomness is the unknowable. Reality to us, people say, well, I know reality. I know the sun is going to rise. I know the sun's going to set. That there's a degree of certainty to that. There is, however, a degree of risk, if you will, that it may not happen, but it's very, very likely that it will. So when we think about randomness, it's unknowable. What is unknowable? The experience that I had, I never thought I would have a death experience. It was completely unknowable. That's randomness. And if you look at COVID, and COVID is something that occurred when reality is random as it is. When a crisis occurs, we say now there's uncertainty in the environment. So if you ask all the companies, if you ask all the people, well, there's too much uncertainty that we have to deal with now. That uncertainty is us now becoming aware of the randomness. And if we try to essentially control it, then we apply risk. I want to mention, and again, I want to get to the words, but I want to present that background. If you think about a dice, right? A dice, you throw a dice, you get 1 out of 6 sides. That is essentially that probability we talk about as risk. Reality isn't like that. Reality and uncertainty is an infinite dice. You don't know all the dimensions. So now how do we make sense of this? Well, I'm gonna say, take that as a backdrop. And now when you begin to think about things, think about the world as being ordered and disordered and how we deal with the reality in between and the stresses. So if we look at that, then the concepts we use are agility, sustainability, resilience, etc. And I want to take each one. First off, these are relative properties. So Psi can be agile to a specific source, to a specific degree, and only relative to that degree of exposure. So it's not infinite, it's not immortal. So you take these words, the word agility is very much about adapting to change. So if I say something is agile, how adaptive to change is it? We adapt to change in order to survive. And a lot of what I'm describing is actually in John Boyd's work. Those are the roots of it. That's what agility, it's about adaptation. We go one step further, we talk about sustainability. If something is sustainable, it has the ability to continue. So sustainability is about continuing. We talk about things that are robust, very, very distinct. The ability to be robust is the ability to endure. How much stress can Sangram endure? Those are very, very distinct concepts. If we say now Sangram is resilient, well, being resilient means you can recover. So the core concepts of fundamentally sustainability, that is very much about continuing, about robustness is enduring, and likewise resilience is about recovering. Now we get to anti-fragility. A lot of people have conflated agility and anti-fragility. Agility deals with adapting to change. Anti-fragility is about fundamentally evolving from disorder. Let me go a little bit even more very critically now. When you talk about agility, it's adapting to change. Your worldview is that you presume the world is ordered. When you presume the world is ordered, now you're going to adapt to the changes that manifest in that order. So it's really on one end of the spectrum. If you talk about anti-fragility, you're on the whole other end of the spectrum. You presume the world is disordered, like the Hydra. And the Hydra now experiences disorder. And we seek that disorder in order to grow from it. In saying that, Sangram, essentially when you chop off the head of a Hydra to grow back, exactly as you emphasized in the video, it wants you to chop off its head. It doesn't simply say, I want to react. No, I want you to create disorder. So I have to tell you, you look at companies, and I look at companies right now and all the language they use, and they say, we're agile or we're anti-fragile. No, let me be very clear. You're lucky. You are extremely lucky. You are truly, you are lucky. You are anti-fragile if you go ahead and seek disruption, intentionally seek disruption. those are very, very key. So in an agile perspective, we presume the world is ordered. In an anti-fragile perspective, we presume the world is disordered. And these intersect in the middle on the edge. This is why I use the word edge in my book. They intersect at the edge. And when they intersect now, you have to ask yourself, am I seeking equilibrium? That's agile, seeking order. Or am I truly, truly now seeking turbulence so I can grow from that turbulence? If I can pose a question to the group very naturally, when was the last time you went out and did something that scared you intentionally to grow from it? When was the last time you challenged your assumptions? When was the last time, and I do this, I'm very grateful for being with both of you. When I do other talks, I tell people, I say, you know something, you want me to introduce myself? Let me take my phone and let's choose a random number. Let's call someone and let them introduce me. Think about the degree of stress that puts on me, that puts on them, so we can grow. So those are some of the key tenets. And you may say, gosh, Sai, it sounds very conceptual. It's very conceptual, but you can take this and put it immediately into practice in the way that we can begin to embrace these concepts and really grow from them.
So is the habit of, I mean, it comes as a connected question, but is the first step to embracing and trying to become anti-fragile comes from your wish or your willingness to completely embrace the uncertain, the unknown?
It definitely starts there, because reality, if you will, we come into the world crying because of fear of what is this? So our natural instinct now is try to control what we fear. And just like in that natural control response, to recognize that reality isn't good or bad, it just is. And at that point, accept that the world is actually random. We know so little. It is truly random. There is no guarantee. And for me, as I've died 3 times, Alok and I talked about the first time. I don't know if it's going to happen again. I don't know when, I don't know where, I don't know why. But that, if you accept the randomness, then the uncertainty is when we become aware of the randomness. And then when we try to exert control, we call it risk. Risk is a mere illusion. It is truly the illusion of certainty. Even we take it one extent, Sangram, further, the distinction between risk and uncertainty is muddy. What I tell people is think about order and disorder. You've got order on one side, you've got randomness on the other, and everything in the middle is where life happens and innovation, the edge.
Wow. And I think that connects to the statement that you made, I think, in a conversation earlier, is that, and I'd like you to elaborate on that, where you said life lies on the edge. And it was so fascinating, it was so goosebumpy to know that it's only when you encounter your fear right at the edge of the known is where you actually come alive, where you feel the goosebumps, where you actually feel.
Most definitely. If we don't push ourselves, if you ask yourself, I get up every morning, I have a routine, right? Order is about very much, if you will, the routines that we go through. And having those routines, and these are, I'm gonna use very specific words, and you can see the distinctions. Routine is very much about the ordinary. I get up in the morning, I have my coffee, I go to work, very routine. Now, what would happen if we think about that? We say, okay, now we're going to flip it to the other side. You're going to wake up in the morning, or Sangram, you're going to begin your week. I'm going to take your calendar every day and I'm going to change it, or just make it completely new to you. At that point, when you walk in and experience, you're going to say, wait a minute. The first question is, do I have the confidence to engage my day? Because now I don't even know what day I'm on. Do I have the courage to figure it out? I got to make this call. I got to make that call. Confidence and courage manifest as we engage disorder and randomness. Very, very important. In the middle ground, Sangram, the question I always tell people is life on the edge. How curious are you? How creative are you? You have to start with curiosity. If you and I are on a trip together, are you going to pull out a map and look at the map and think about where are we going? Or are we going to say, Sangram, let's just start walking in this direction and see what happens? And the roots of these concepts, right? Antifragility is to Taleb. Resilience is to Holling. So if people really want to dig in deeper into the concepts, and then John Boyd's agility. But very much life happens on the edge. I mentioned to Alok, when we first met, most people are the walking dead. They're not alive. They're just following a script. They're waiting for time to pass. Well, to be honest with you, I've passed 3 times. At this point, enjoy the magic, embrace the magic. You know, I have my cup of coffee this morning. It's mystical. I grab my cup of coffee, I step outside into the cold, and I feel the warmth, and it brings life to me.
Wow.
Good, good. I think you're putting into context far more than what business is all about. I think it's beyond business. It's all about life. And by the way, Hydra equivalent we have in the Indian mythology, Ravan or Ravana, whatever you want. He had 10 heads, and you could chop one and it comes up again. By the way, the 10 heads are nothing but 10. It reflects some of the ills that we have within the body, and so that's what it reflects. So just hey Sangram, do you want to do a quick poll?
Yeah. I think first, I think although it's a little simple now because I think he's spoken a lot, but just to kind of test out how much of people have absorbed, I think, Shweta, can we have the first poll where we're trying to understand whether people have understood what antifragility is? So your options are very simple. What is antifragility? It is the opposite of fragility. Is it resilience, or is it thriving on disorder and chaos?
So we give another 10 seconds. Most have got it right. Okay, we can end the poll. I think most have got it right. It is thriving on disorder and chaos. So it is that. So good answer. Good answer. Okay. So do we do another poll quickly, or let me ask a question otherwise?
Or Alok, do you mind if I say something relative to the poll? Because I think it ties to exactly the question that you asked. You know, I really encourage people, and I see this right now, especially with COVID hitting, I see a lot of people taking what they've already been talking about and saying it's anti-fragile. I'm very, very frank. Anti-fragility is not resilience 2.0. I heard someone say, well, it's resilience 2.0. No, it's not. It's a whole different concept. I've heard people say, well, you know, it's about positive psychology. Actually, let's talk about the practicalities here in a minute. It's not positive psychology. Positive psychology has contribution to how the mechanics might work, but it's definitively different, extremely different. So I really encourage people to treat the concepts with respect. And I really emphasize, again, these are not absolutes. These are properties, degrees on a spectrum. These don't make you immortal. So please keep that in mind. And it's relative to specific sources. People say they're anti-fragile today. I tell them, what is the source and what's the degree of stress that you've experienced relative to that source? Most people can't answer those questions. So please treat them with respect. And I wanted to provide that as you kind of look at the polls that we're doing.
Absolutely.
Maybe we should do the second poll to clarify what you did. I was wondering whether we should do the second poll immediately or not, or maybe we should do that. And Shweta, just go ahead and put it up. And the question for the viewers is, you've heard about it. Which of the following is the best example of being anti-fragile? Nature, businesses, economy.
This is going to be divided.
Clearly.
And I don't think we want to give the answers. I think we want Sai to give the answers to this.
Yeah. So we'll leave it here and let me go through the question, and then let's see. Okay, we can end the poll. And this is the answer that we're getting. Resounding 75% for nature. Some go for businesses, some for economy. And before I give the right answer, here is a question for Sai. So Sai, couple of so this poll example needs to go out. So Sai, a couple of sessions ago, Babita Sinha and Soumya Tiwari of YGC, and you know them because you guys are working on a global collaboration side. They talked about a very interesting topic. The business of nature is the nature of business. You know, they work with greens, and they briefly touched upon the nature of business. Can you thread us through these links? Because I know it's very close to your heart and antifragility. Can you thread us through these links?
It's also kind of related to the question about examples of nature being antifragile or economy being antifragile. To build on that.
Intuitively, the guys, the viewers got it, but let's go. Let's hear from Sai.
Definitively, nature is the teacher of anti-fragility. Without nature, we wouldn't understand anti-fragility. I want to talk about it generally and then zoom in on it very specifically. If you think about each of us is an experiment by nature. You have no idea what Sangram is going to accomplish. You have no idea what Alok's going to accomplish. You have no idea what I'm going to accomplish or anyone else, or what we're not going to accomplish, what we're going to do. So nature takes a gamble. Nature takes a gamble on all of us. And then in that gamble, things begin to happen. Nature doesn't control the situation. That's very, very key. If you take the mindset now of, okay, now we have to look at a situation, whether it's personal or professional. Notice I go back to control. Nature doesn't have control of the elements that are there. Each one is a gamble. They have their own autonomy, and then and things manifest. Here's where nature is extremely, extremely intelligent. Nature does not force life into everything. Nature naturally lets things die. This is a struggle for a lot of things. COVID, if we look at COVID, I think it was mentioned a couple weeks ago, exactly in the conversation here with you, Alok. COVID is really testing society and humanity. There are things that are passing, that are dying. So nature naturally applies a filter. Now, if you take nature and you think about, well, how does this now? How do we turn this into practice? What do we do with it? If you take a business or an organization or your own home, treat it as an ecology. Treating it as an ecology at that point says it's an ecosystem of different elements. They can coexist. They will exhibit sustainability. They will exhibit degrees of agility, degrees of anti-fragility, etc. As I like to say, most organizations need to become ecosystem enterprises, ecologies internally. That's very, very crucial. Those that say, hey, we're anti-fragile, I very much look at the organization and want to understand the ecology of internally. And I'm going to be very specific here in a minute. That's one aspect. But there's also now an ecology of a business ecosystem. Those are two distinct concepts. And it's interesting, what I'm seeing now in the landscape is people convoluting those concepts. They say, well, it's all about business ecosystems. Yes, business ecosystems in the outside, but also enterprise ecosystems on the inside. Now, I want to make these very, very tangible for us. If we look at those concepts, I'm gonna approach it in the following way, Alok and Sangram. I want to talk about sort of what I like to call the 5 E's and the 5 C's, and give examples of how these manifest in practice. This is how nature is incubated in organizations and also in our everyday life. One is, if you think about an ecosystem, this is one of the E's, an ecosystem. It has a configuration. It's not simply, let me design a structure and a process. It has a configuration. I have no idea where Alok is sitting. I have no idea where Sangram is today. But that configuration is fluid and it will change. So there's fluidity, it's continuous fluidity in that ecosystem. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is engagement. How do we connect with each other? In that connection, you think about individuals that have to be very fluid. As if we are working as a team, us three in particular, there may be times that Sangram's not available. A few weeks back, Sangram was not on the show. So how do we go ahead and work with that? That fluidity on Sangram's part likewise dictates that you and I, Alok, continue to flow in order to achieve whatever we need to achieve. So that engagement and that connectivity is another aspect. The next one is entrepreneurship. And this one is extremely key, because when we're entrepreneurial, fundamentally, we ask ourselves, what are the options that we have? What are the experiments and what opportunities are we going to pursue? Then when we identify those opportunities, we come together, form congruence around them or harmony around those, and pursue them. Now, I realize that I want to put these out there, and then I want to give very specific examples of how to use these. So I've mentioned engagement. Think about being independent of Sangram when he was away. Think about also building redundancy so that we don't depend on him. Think about entrepreneurship and the opportunities we want to pursue and the options and the experiments. Then if we're an enterprise, what binds us? For example, as to what binds us, we say, Alok, you and I are brothers from a different life. That creates binding between us. At that point, there's something that makes us whole together. When we look at Sangram in the equation, what is it that binds all of us? Well, it's this show that binds us today, something that brings us all together. That degree of wholeness is very, very key. And then what really makes the last E and the last C crucial is we experience reality. Based on that experience, we're going to change and recalibrate. Now, those are very, very, and there's a book that I'm working on likewise relative to this whole concept and elaborating it. But I want to give some very, very specific examples, if you will. I had a client ages ago call me and they say, Sai, we are ready for whatever happens. This is pre-COVID. We are ready for whatever happens. We have our business model. We have our operating model. We understand what our customers want and we deliver that value. And this was pre-COVID. And then things began to manifest in the marketplace and volatility began to enter the picture, disorder began to enter the picture. And they said, you know, we need to reshuffle, we need to reconfigure things. They couldn't get things to move. They couldn't shift or reconfigure, if you will, very much so their processes, their models, their people, nothing would change because everyone was following a script and they began to struggle. So the inability to reconfigure becomes crucial. That's a very much a business context. If I take it on a personal context, if I'm going to go visit you, Sangram, in your home, if you will, you have a specific configuration of your furniture today. Well, I have to tell you, I have back problems, and my back problems preclude me from sitting on things where my feet don't touch the ground. How much is it going to take, and how long is it going to take, and can you do it in reconfiguring your environment to accommodate me as I visit you? That ability to reconfigure begins to really tie into very much an ecosystem viewpoint. Let me take another one, if I may. And this one, this next one really ties into the whole notion of, if you will, our ability to adapt together and our ability to be independent and redundant and also look for opportunities and experiment. I had a client that said, you know something, we have a skills gap in our organization. And we can't find the right people. There's always a skill gap. So I said, what you need to do is establish a marketplace on a quarterly basis, fundamentally bring people together, understand how skills have shifted relative to what's needed by your customers, and allow that marketplace to reconfigure itself. As that began to manifest, they began to quickly form new teams. In that formation of new teams, they can accommodate the opportunities. The same thing applied as an ecosystem view. And this is what nature does. Nature is deliberate in letting things do all these things, do what it needs to do, and all the elements play out as the way I'm describing. I want to give one more, and this one is a little bit pointed, if you will. I worked with an organization, and what I found is the C-suite, the CEO, the CFO, COO, if you will, CHRO, were very, very tightly knit together. So tightly knit together that any person that came into the organization that threatened their power base or didn't agree with them, they filtered out, they removed people. Well, over time, you can imagine that it was too homogeneous. So when you lose the diversity now, you lose the ability, if you will, to recalibrate with reality. So they became so homogeneous, they became fragile at that point. And then as the marketplace began to change, they couldn't respond in kind to the marketplace. They essentially began to break down. Before you know it, their stock began to sink. The impacts to their organization began to happen. And then ultimately they were ousted because fundamentally they were too homogeneous and they could not work, if you will, relative to the reality around them. I want to individualize it and then kind of open the conversation even further for questions, perhaps, Alok and Sangram. If I look at, yeah.
Go.
Forgive me. If I look at everyone that's with us today, and I ask a simple question, what assumption are you making when you got out of bed today? When you went to, give me one assumption that you've made, and then I want you to challenge that assumption. Did you assume that you were going to meet someone? Did you assume that you were going to be in a place at a particular time? Did you assume that there was something you were going to do? When you challenge that assumption, the more assumptions you begin to challenge, the more we begin to now think in an ecological way. That goes for assumptions, that goes for some constraints, that goes for dependencies as well. Those are some sort of quick examples, but we can definitely dig deeper to your point, Sangram, if you have a thought.
The stream of questions flowing in, Sai.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to finish and wrap up one last question before we get on to the audience questions. And I think to the audiences, this session may prolong a bit. I think we had factored because when we spoke to Sai, and this was the first session, I think, where we took 2 sessions to really, between us, to deep dive into Sai's concepts on antifragility. And we said that we will be flexible enough to extend the session if required. So Sai, my question is, we spoke about nature. And what I found most exciting is in the very first question you said, how willing am I to be the Hydra? To basically say, hey, disorder, bring it on. I'm ready for you, right? And well, I mean, for that thought itself, I think we are in the middle of disorder, right? And we don't have to ask for it. It's come to us. And if we are to adopt that mindset of being anti-fragile, well, everything around us to be anti-fragile is already there, right? And the second part, which you said, is that nature itself is anti-fragile. And an anti-fragile system has several fragile elements which die, which basically make the ecosystem stronger. So in a time like this, when entrepreneurs are facing this, what tips would you give? What strategies would you give to individuals and corporations, given so much of disorder around, to build the anti-fragile character?
Definitely. And thank you for that elaborated question, if you will. In particular, I'm going to ask it as a few direct points, very, very direct points. If you look at what you do, you know, what are you dependent on? Are you dependent on a salary? Then your salary makes you fragile. If you're dependent on something, it makes you fragile. Now, you can't get rid of all dependencies. You have to balance it. You can depend on multiple sources of a salary. That goes into options. I have multiple sources, multiple options that I can begin to tap into. So very specifically, as you look around the environment, there is a tremendous amount of pressure for us to identify opportunities. So what options do I have? If my business is struggling, what options do I have? What lines of business can I open up? What relationships, very explicitly, can I reach out to explore if there are opportunities that we can pursue? When you have those options, then begin to experiment. Let's do something real simple together, Alok, right? It's an option to do something. Let's start a new show. Let's bring shows together. Let's try new platforms. Identify your options, experiment with those options. That will begin to reveal the opportunities. This is a very, very key characteristic, if you will, of really very much embracing reality. That's the pillar that I use. That is embracing reality, identifying your options, beginning to experiment, and winning in the way that you need to win. The other piece of this is you need to stay alive. You need to ensure your aliveness. The way you do this is, again, what are you dependent on? How can you relieve that dependency on that? If I'm dependent on multiple salaries, if I'm dependent on my neighbor to be able to go ahead and get to some place in order to get food, how do I have multiple neighbors, if you will, so I become less dependent? What do you not need? If you look around and you say, I get up every morning, and everyone is discovering this. Do we really need to travel to a single place to do work together? Or could we use Zoom, or could we use some other technology? So we have cultivated a lot of dependency. Ask yourself what dependencies you don't need. Ask yourself, what's going to make you more independent? If you think about our relationship together, 5 years ago, we hadn't encountered each other. Now that we've encountered each other, we actually are more independent by knowing each other than not knowing each other. That allows us to be further alive. So if I look at all of the things that are happening around you, ask yourself, what will give you more independence? What will allow you to be redundant so that other people aren't dependent on you? For example, if you have your spouse, your children can depend on you or your spouse. You become redundant respectfully in that way in this time. Additionally, what options do you have and what experiments do we need to do? these questions might seem abstract in a sense, but if you truly sit down and ask yourself these questions relative to your circumstances, they begin to reveal the answers that allow us to tap into the current time, Sangram.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Sai, and this, I know you asked this question 5 years ago. We didn't know each other, and at some point in time, you said a lot of this is randomness, right? It's nature didn't plan for it; it just happened. Someone wrote a book, you reached out, we became such close friends, Sangram, and so it just kept expanding. Now, when there is a degree of randomness, you accept what is happening. Then there is a dependency you talked about, right? I need money to run my house. So how does the money come in? And if there's only one source, I have a problem. But you've been extremely provocative with some of your blogs. And I remember once we were discussing and you said, why people have affairs? And then you said sometimes transgression is a route to transformation. And I would like to ping you a little bit more about this, because there are times when and there are a lot of questions which are coming in. Do we just give it up? I mean, how do you become more antifragile? There must be some change. So that is the question, right? How does transformation occur? What do you do in terms of positive transgression? I think that's where I would put it. And how do people do that? So
I think Alok, you should straight away ask him. I think he made a very provocative statement saying that what is the kind of people that fall into affairs, right?
Yes, that's what he said.
I think I want you to pick up on that. The psyche of people who get into affairs, and that's a very interesting one side that you gave. I want you to elaborate on that.
Most definitely. So what I want to do is I want to, if you will, I'd like to give an example of it in practice, and then dive into the specifics of how it worked, if you will. Is that reasonable?
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, and this is in the time of COVID. So I'm working with numerous clients. COVID hit. I got phone calls. People said, we have no idea what's happening. Now, look at the story, independent of the question that you just asked, and then we'll bring the question into it. They said, we don't know what to do. We don't understand what's happening. We're struggling. We can't make sense of the world. You hear the word sense, and we can't make sense of the reality, anything, the world, the situation that we're in. I said, no problem. Let's go ahead and grab your leadership team together, bring that leadership group together. And I brought them together, and they said, okay, what are we going to do? And of course, this was virtual, etc. I said, I want you to tell me what's volatile around you, what's uncertain, what's complex, what's ambiguous, the VUCA, as the terminology goes. And I asked the question, I said, I just want you to express yourself in 5-10 minutes. And they had a lot of conversation, expressed a lot of ideas. People say, okay, what were you looking for? I wasn't looking for anything. All I wanted them to do was to go ahead and express the reality that they were experiencing. They could have said almost anything. It didn't matter. Then I said, now that we understand that, let's go ahead and tell me about where you are. And where you are in terms of what do you think our strengths are? What do you think our weaknesses are as an organization, as a team, as a group, as a collection of people? What are our opportunities? I said, there are no opportunities right now. We just want to survive. What are the threats? Is it that people are distributed? Is it that people don't know what to do? And there was a lot of conversation at that point. Now we had a recognition of the world around us, the recognition of where we are and how we see ourselves. I said, okay, we've made the observations. You've already said our objective is to survive, not even thrive at this point, just survive. What decisions do we have to make, and what actions do we have to immediately take? From that whole conversation, within an hour, they had a collection of decisions that they made about what needs to happen to ensure that the business continues, sustainability, and likewise ensure that we can move forward. And we started to enact those decisions. Here's where now the transformation begins to happen and gets into the question of themselves and what they're doing. Notice what I did is I expressed a lot of care. I expressed a tremendous amount of care for them and about them. I was expressing love, very explicitly in that. And love, this is from Sternberg's definition of love. I was expressing awareness of where they are. I was putting my energy into it. And as they made decisions and decided to take action very decisively, I was going ahead and committing with them relative to those decisions. Those are three characteristics of love that when we express when we care about someone. In the business world, we call it partnership. This is me partnering. So take that scenario and let's continue it further. They started to enact those decisions, right? Take on those actions, if you will. And we started to do this every day. Every day we'd come together and say, okay, what new observations are you making, Alok? What are you seeing? What new orientation do we have? This built up the muscle now, and they began to sustain over time. As things began to stabilize relative to COVID, we started to talk about how do we thrive. So that cycle is a very deliberate way that manifests. I mentioned the word love already. And this is where transgression begins to enter the picture and what have you. When I expressed love, awareness, applied my energy, and also, if you will, supported their commitments and decisions, that's me expressing care for them. In this process, and I didn't ask it in the same way, I said very, very simply to myself, what do you want out of this? Where do you want to get to? And they said, we want to survive. Remember, that's the orientation. We want to survive. When we talk about lust, and this actually goes to, excuse me, this actually goes to Rabbi Shmuley's work. There are very specific characteristics of lust. What do you want? It is a wanting. If you want something, it's unavailable to you. In this context, what was unavailable is some degree of sanity. Forget stability, forget risk. I just need some sanity. What is my reality now? So what they wanted, what they lusted for, and I lusted with them, if you will, because I love them, is sanity. So one characteristic, it was unavailable. So they wanted that. How do we get there? And what does sanity look like now that COVID is here? Well, that's a mystery. That's the second characteristic of lust, is it's mysterious. So very fundamentally, it's unavailable to me. So I lust after it. It's mysterious. It's something different. Go back to identity. It's something uniquely not me today. That fundamentally is that mystery. And then the last one, it's forbidden. Those are three characteristics of lust, very, very deliberately. It's unavailable, it's mysterious, and it's forbidden. Sanity was forbidden to us when COVID hit. We didn't know what was going to happen. So we lusted after that. So given love and lust, now we get to the question, Alok, that you really pointed out. How do we transgress? How do we go from where we are to where we want to be? First, there's three characteristics to transgression, or if you will, to an affair. One is people have to be involved. In this case, we were all involved in helping this group transgress from where they are to where they wanted to be. I was involved, they were involved. That's part of the transgression process. That's where it starts. If people are not involved, there is no affair. This actually goes to Esther Perel's work. So all of these are grounded in other people's work, just me wrapping the concepts up in practice and how people experience them. So one is we're all involved. That's one aspect. The second aspect, and this really ties very deliberately to awakening them, if you will, in that involvement. They're energized. The second aspect, very deliberate, is there's an element of secrecy now. Remember, it's mysterious, right? What is this mystery that we need to get to, and that secrecy? So when people are involved in having an affair, there's a secret to it. Not everyone knows about the affair. When I was working with this group, one client, I was actually also working with another client. Both of them didn't know that I was working with both of them. Two different groups. There's an element of secrecy, not between them, but rather to that new future that we want to get to. So one is being involved, two is secrecy. And then the third element that Esther Perel really calls out is alchemy. How do you actualize all this? And at the core of this is we have fidelity with a better self a new identity because of all the aspects I already mentioned around love and lust. We have fidelity to that new one, and we apply the energy and transgress. So if you look at, that's a very much a business context. And believe me, and exactly as you said, I got a lot of heat when I wrote that. They said, Sai, how could you say that? And I said, this is the nature of transformation. When in the business context, it's extremely powerful when put into play, and you see the impact of it in that transgression very, very explicitly. But it really does bring back that aliveness. And if you think about anyone that has had an affair, respectfully, and I say that respectfully, has had an affair or what have you, it is really a change of identity. If you look at these different clients I mentioned, if you look at the different people that do have it, it's wanting a new identity. There's a part of yourself that dies, a part of yourself that born, and it manifests. So I answered the question, hopefully, Alok, from a very respectful way. I'll put it that way, in the business context.
But I think what you're also coming in, I like that piece which you had said. If you want to transform, it is a love affair with your future self. I remember you had said the transformation is a love affair with your future self. And I think you put it so well.
And there are 3 characteristics to look for, Alok. If someone says, I really want to, and this for me is a test with clients or people I work with, and I do executive coaching, I go throughout the organization, a transformation at large, and very deliberately, the first question I ask is, are you in enough pain? Truly, are you experiencing enough pain? Most people don't change because they're not experiencing enough pain. That's one question. The next question, is the pain sufficient enough that you're going to open up to new options, a new identity, the potential, right, of having an affair with your future self? Is fundamentally, are you open enough? Most people aren't open enough, because once the peak of pain hits, then you go ahead and become open. And then the third question for me, characteristic, is extremely important. Do you care about something other than yourself? Because if it's all about you, to be very honest with you, I'm not interested. Something beyond you makes it important. At that point, that allows me to be committed. That allows me to love you, because you care about something beyond yourself. But if you only care about yourself, respectfully, then you're selfish. Why should I love you then?
That's right.
Why should I lust with you? Notice, not lust for you, lust with you to your future self.
Yeah. So the whole journey of transformation, actually, anyone who's been through an affair has actually been through the whole journey of transformation. Right?
Most definitely.
Very risky to put it that way, Sangram.
Yes.
It can cause trouble on our show, but yes. Yeah, let's leave it there.
Yeah. So I think there are a lot of questions, a lot of interesting questions coming from the audience. And I think I'm going to dive into the very first one from Samir Sathe. And it says, how does the concept of antifragility work with chaos theory?
So excellent question. So you remember I mentioned there's order and disorder. Chaos theory talks about the edge of chaos, and the edge of chaos is actually in between order and chaos. So without getting too technical, the key thing, agility comes in from the order side, anti-fragility comes in from the disorder side, with sustainability, robustness, and resilience dancing with agility and anti-fragility at the edge of chaos. If you look at my book, there's a reason why I said the anti-fragility edge, is because it is literally the edge of chaos. The 2 concepts, Sangram, and to the person who's asking the question, the 2 concepts I mentioned, and I elaborated them through the heuristics that I talked about, ensuring aliveness so that you're independent and redundant, and likewise, at the same time, embracing reality so that you can look at your options and experiment in order to go after opportunities. So it's right there in the middle.
Yeah.
In fact, Samir asked, sorry, Singa.
A connected question from Sujit. Would you like to take that on? It basically says, can anti-fragility be defined as moving out of your comfort zone, perhaps more self-induced than externally induced?
And I'd like to add, because I was just, same question with Samir Sathe. By the way, Samir was with us on the show about 6 shows back. He's helping SMEs, the small and medium enterprises, come out of the COVID problem. He works with the Vadvani Foundation. So the same thing what Sujit has asked, something similar. He says, it's always uncertainty around us because the predictability is becoming tougher. So assuming disorder with peace means being comfortable with disequilibrium. Is that what we are trying to say? And the same thing Sujit is saying, can antifragility be defined as moving out of comfort zone, perhaps more self-induced than externally induced?
Most definitely, most definitely. And the reason I say that is think about the words we use. It's adapting to change. That's agility, because you're adapting to something. If you're evolving from disorder, right? Evolving from something, you're taking something away. Induce it, surprise yourself. I've been actually to Hungary. In Hungary, they have Turkish baths in Hungary where the temperature is significantly below zero in one bath. In another bath, the temperature is significantly higher than 100, if you will. You jump into one pool and then you jump into the other pool. And you can't stay in too long because you'll go into shock. So you stress your system so you can handle more and rejuvenate. It is self-induced. This is why when I say, people are saying, well, we're agile or we're anti-fragile. No, you're just lucky because it's not self-induced. So that's very key. And it's both, COVID itself is an external force, but then do you seek more disorder? If you seek more disorder, do you take more risks, if you will? So risking is another right word we've talked about. Are you risk seeking? But it's got to be intelligent. Yeah. I don't like risk aversion and risk seeking as plain labels. I actually like risk savvy or risk awareness. Are you aware for the risks that you're inducing, the pressures and the stresses you're inducing? Very much. I think it's definitely landing for what we're describing, Sangram and Alok.
Absolutely. I think there are more questions coming in. There was one from Anurag, which had come earlier.
That's right.
And it says, what do failures teach us and how do you bounce back? You've kind of answered that, but maybe you'd like to elaborate.
So really think about failures, if you can think of as learning opportunities, right? We've talked about this before. Go after them, seek challenges that will push you to the extreme. There's a major distinction, and this is, the concepts, as I've mentioned, anti-fragility has been abused in many ways, because a lot of people say, well, let's just add more and more pressure. There is a degree of stress that gets you into the edge of chaos, as we mentioned already. There's a degree of that essentially is eustress. If you push too far, it becomes de-stress at that point. Enough de-stress puts you into trauma, puts you into shock, and then ultimately ruins you and puts you into death. So exactly. So you have to be, and I always tell people, when you work with a coach, very openly, and and we talk about coaching, we're provoking. They have to be extremely attuned to what's happening. I'll give you a very, very simple example. I've got a bad heart. In the first death, they discovered one of the aspects, I've got a bad heart. It stops. It's slow. It stops for 3 seconds every now and then, so you never know. So what I have to do is I have to exercise. When I exercise, I go on a treadmill or I run outside, but I have to be aggressive. So think about this for a minute now. If I get on a treadmill and I start running at 10 miles an hour, 12 miles an hour, highest inclination, that's a lot of stress. That's a significant amount of stress. I need that degree of stress on my heart to keep it beating. Now, I don't know, Sangram, if you exercise, so forgive me if I'm making a guess here. If I say, Sangram, let's go exercise together, right? And I say, Sangram, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you on this treadmill, and this treadmill, I'm going to put it up to 10 miles an hour. Now that's too low. Let's make it 12 miles an hour, highest inclination. Okay, Sangram, go. If you don't exercise, you're going to get thrown off. It's too much stress. That would become de-stress. So I have to start and build up. Once I build up, then I begin to see where the tolerances are, see what you can handle, and then begin to push you out of your comfort zone, as we've been saying, and really begin to thrive on more stresses. So hopefully that elaboration offered a little bit beyond at that point.
Yeah. So we have Vihar, a student, and asking us, what is where anti-fragility occurs? And talks about US Navy SEALs handle it by deep bonding with the team. Is that something that can be translated to business?
Excellent question. Yeah, I'm sorry, Alok.
No, so is the question right? And is the Does bonding increase antifragility or decrease antifragility?
So I want to mention two aspects to teams very specifically. Very specifically, if you look at a team that is able to deal with conflict and that is able to collaborate and extremely collaborative, and we get along on everything, we collaborate, we deal with the conflict, and we're able to do what needs to be accomplished. Not only are we dealing with conflict and collaboration, but we are also performant in the way that we need to perform. Something happens, COVID hits, are we going to perform? Are we going to collaborate? If we are used to working together, it actually builds fragility. So when you look at teams that are performant, teams that can collaborate so well together, all you need is the right black swan, if you will, to show up. At that point, they're very fragile. The most fragile concept in organizations are teams.
You're right.
The concept we need is teaming. This is the marketplace. This is the ecology. Take the teams, shuffle them, if you will. Once they shuffle in the right way, it builds muscle. That's extremely key. So one is over collaboration, actually, and over optimization builds fragility. We talk about lean. We talk about Six Sigma. Those essentially achieve optimization, but they build fragility in. So teams, I shuffle teams. I worked with them, and I'm not the one shuffling them. I create the ecology for them to shuffle themselves. At the same time, then, a high-performing team that is always high-performing is actually fragile when, if you will, the disorder appears. Absolutely. They may go up, they may go down. Most likely, they're going to go down. Alok and Sangram, do you mind if I give two very specific examples as to how you can put this in practice? A lot of organizations, when I work with them, a lot of groups, and you can apply this to families. They say, well, we know exactly what we need to accomplish. These are our priorities. These are our objectives, right? This is what needs to happen. And they say, we're anti-fragile. Here's a very simple test to test anti-fragility. That list of priorities, flip it upside down. You've disrupted them now. You've created disorder now. When you flip the priorities upside down, most teams, they're going to dip. Well, you've changed everything. Well, wait a minute. This is complete disorder. This is what COVID did to companies. We had no idea. All of our plans went out the window. When they take that dip, can they get out? Now if they can get out, that's resilience. They're not anti-fragile yet. We've stressed them. But now apply changing that every day. That's a higher stress. Have they become stronger? Is the dip less? That's essentially anti-fragility there beginning to manifest. So that's a very, very specific example. I want to give one more specific example. I had a client, this was 2 decades ago, at least, if not longer. I've been doing this for far too long, over 4 decades now, but at least 2 decades ago, before the popularity of anti-fragility was there. They said, Sai, we have a problem here. We're a financial institution, major financial institution. We have some groups and some departments that are undertaxed some time of the year. And we have other groups and other departments that are overtaxed at some time of the year. And, we're either killing people or we're not getting the performance we need. So what do we do? And I said to them, and this is the concept of teams, because they were talking about teams. I said, well, what we need to do is every month we'll start shuffling everybody. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, bring them together, let them decide what they need to learn, and we'll shuffle. And every month we started to do that in different pockets. They began to essentially be exposed. They began to experience stress. I now have to learn what Alok is doing. When I experience that stress, I become stronger at that point. We're naturally anti-fragile, but society habitualizes us to get it out of us. Look at children. Children, is very natural for them to start playing with each other and immediately gain of who I want to play with, etc. Here's what happened in the business situation. They said, Sai, you're crazy. I said, well, to be honest with you, you're not the first one to say I'm crazy. I accept that as a compliment. So that's okay. That's perfectly fine. They said, well, if we're going to do this, all the literature says you have to have teams. This was before teaming was introduced into the world. Again, decades ago. I said, I'll tell you what, do this for 3 months. If 3 months you don't see the results, I will pay you. I will return what you're paying me, and I will pay you double. But if you see the results, then we have a different conversation. As soon as they began to see it, naturally take a dip, right? Because you're going to be impacted. You take that dip, teams began to be resilient. They began to sustain the dip, take it on, go from sustainability, robustness to resilience, and then they began to increase. They saw productivity skyrocket. And they began to be able to address more disorder in their business environment.
So I know we've got Arvind Radhakrishnan on the call, on the webinar, and he asked this question. And I think, Arvind, you should have got your answer from Sai's previous answer, that resilience in a company is a result of how resilient you make your team. And you were asking, how do you do that? And so I just gave you that answer without actually asking this question. So great. Yes, Arvind, thanks. I can see that. So Sangram, I think we've more or less run out of questions. Are there any more?
I can take one more, which I find particularly interesting, I think, because someone just picked up the right thread. There's this girl, Ritika, who's kind of identified, is evolution an example of antifragility? So I find that very fascinating.
Is a revolution?
Is
evolution an example?
Evolution.
Evolution. EVO.
So evolution is the mechanism, similar to what we said. This is why I say adaptability is to agility as evolution is to anti-fragility. Evolution is the engine. When we talk about ecology, evolution is the engine that makes all this work. So I would say the way to think about it is very much in that vein, Sangram, to that question is evolution is the instrument that gives us anti-fragility. Anti-fragility isn't what gives us evolution. I want to, if I can give you a very specific example relative to this one. How do we help in an ecosystem in organizations? How do we help it evolve, right? Here's what I want you to do. Take any company you've worked with, take any situation. And what I mean by company, it's an enterprise, a group of people working towards something. When you think about, there's natural hierarchies in the organization. There's very natural hierarchies. There's not reporting structure, natural hierarchies. There's actually a very natural hierarchy in our conversation today. The hierarchy is Sangram and Alok, this is your show. I have to respect that. You are higher up, I'm a guest, I'm lower.
Never
very natural hierarchy. But it's not disrespectful. It's a natural hierarchy. We're partners together. Here's the power of thinking about it this way, Alok and Sangram. What you need to do if you're higher in the organization is create, and this is where evolution happens. You need to create stability very, very intentionally for the ecosystem, and also create stress, challenges, as we say in the business world, right? Give me a challenge, Alok. Give me a challenge, Sangram. But create stability and stress. What I have to do now, in order to meet the challenges that you've put out there and work within that stability, but also have stress, is I have to innovate. I have to think about novel ways. I have to go ahead and be creative, be curious. That novelty creates, if you will, new products, new services that become disruptions for others. When you have this dynamic, that's when evolution manifests. Stability with stress top down, innovation, novelty, bottom up. When you have that's when evolution works at multiple levels, etc. Where it breaks down, and I'm leaving, this is all Holling's work and panarchies and what have you, so there's a lot of depth here. But where it breaks down is where you have leaders that don't create stability. So, I have no idea what my manager is going to do. It's unstable. I don't know what to do. That's one aspect. Or they create too much stability. They become paternalistic. At that point, they don't apply enough stress. When they don't apply enough stress, people become respectfully lazy. So we stop to evolve. There is a tension that is extremely deliberate, just like we talked about eustress and de-stress. When you look at it as an ecosystem, that's what nature does. Nature looks at that, allows the stresses to manifest, lets things die, or if I use a different word, filters things out. Yes. People don't like the word death. They're filtered, and evolution takes a natural hold. And look at these concepts. They are put into practice very deliberately, but it does require energy. So I've given you a long answer, Sangram. Evolution is the engine, the mechanism of anti-fragility, as adaptation is the engine and the mechanism of agility.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Thank you. I think, Sangram, we've actually overstepped on the time, and we had asked for about 15 minutes. So Sai, thank you very, very much. I think you have deconstructed anti-fragility for all of us. It's not a business construct, right? It is a daily construct. It is something that each one of us can apply to our lives. Students can do that. Housewives can do that. People working can do that. And I think you've done that beautifully. So that is it, viewers. And we must thank Sai for a power-packed session. This was, in my view, this was a session of hope and inspiration. And I'm reasonably sure, and I'm quite sure, that our viewers will walk away with many new dimensions of how to make their lives anti-fragile. And viewers, thank you very much for giving us that additional 15 minutes. We did not want to stop Sai. We realized that he had just too much. Remember, Sai comes with enormous amount of background, enormous amount of experience. And we are really lucky to have him on our show today. So thank you very much for giving us this part of the evening on Saturday. We will continue to get guests and with whom we'll have far more, get more engaging conversation. So with that, Sangram, over to you.
Yeah, no, I just again want to give a very, very heartfelt thanks to Sai. I had a goosebumpy session actually, because no one's really challenged us and told us that we are in good times, you know. And to me, the good news is that we are in disorder. Let's embrace it, you know. And on the most positive note, let's embrace it, because we will come out as beasts out of this, much more stronger. And so many examples from your coaching experience, I think, just made the audiences be able to identify with each of the concepts that you said. And I think we would definitely want to have you sometime later on the show, maybe in season 2, season 3, because I don't think we've had enough of you. So we had that. I hope you enjoyed the time with us as well.
Thank you, Sangram. Thank you, Alok, from the bottom of my heart. And thank you to all the participants. And by all means, it is a very unique time. And you know, I wish everyone well, and please stay safe and healthy.
Thank you. Thank you. Next week, we have Christian Sarkar, who has worked elaborately with Philip Kotler. He comes up with the new age of marketing, rising world of ecosystem, but much more than what is visible here. Join us again. Thank you very, very much.
And have a lovely evening, folks. And thank you for being with us on this Saturday. Bye, Sai. Bye, Alok.
Bye. Bye, Sai.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye, Sangram.